pregnant mother bear was chained in the village. What this human baby did put everyone in tears. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The golden sunset painted long shadows across Willow Creek Village, a small settlement nestled between towering mountains and dense forest. Children played among the wooden cabins while adults hurried to finish their daily chores before darkness fell. The peaceful scene held a stark contrast at its center. A large, pregnant mother bear lay chained to a thick wooden post, her dark fur matted with dust, and her eyes filled with a deep sorrow that seemed to reach into the souls of anyone who dared look directly at her. Lily Morgan, just 11 months old, sat on the porch of her family's cabin, watching the bear with curious eyes. Unlike the adults who passed by with averted gazes or fearful glances, Lily saw only pain in the magnificent creature. The bear's labored breathing echoed across the village square as she struggled against the heavy chains that bit into her fur, leaving raw marks on her skin. Each time she moved, trying to find comfort for her swollen belly, the chains would clank against the post, a harsh reminder of her captivity. "Stay away from that beast," villagers would warn each other as they hurried past. Hunter Ethan brought her back 3 days ago, says she was destroying crops in the eastern fields. But something about the story didn't seem right. The bear made no aggressive movements, no threatening gestures. She simply lay there, her eyes occasionally searching the faces of passing villagers as if pleading for understanding. When night fell and the village grew quiet, her soft whimpers carried on the wind, reaching even the farthest cabins. Lily's mother, Savannah Reed, held her daughter close whenever they walked past the bear. "Don't look, sweetheart," she would whisper, but Lily always turned her head, her innocent eyes meeting the bear's gaze. Something passed between them in those moments, a connection that transcended the boundaries between human and animal, between captivity and freedom. As days passed, the bear grew weaker. Her once glossy fur became dull, and she barely lifted her head when villagers passed by. The chains seemed heavier with each passing hour, and her eyes, once bright with silent pleas, began to dim with resignation. The village elder, Jacob Bennett, had called for a meeting to decide the bear's fate, but no one could agree on what should be done. "She'll give birth soon," some whispered. "We can't keep her chained like this. But what if she attacks once freed?" Others argued. "What about our children?" And so, the bear remained chained, her fate hanging in the balance as surely as the lives she carried within her. What no one realized was that the smallest resident of Willow Creek Village, little Lily, with her innocent heart, would soon change everything with a single act of kindness that would bring tears to the eyes of even the hardest villagers. The morning dawned cold and misty. The bear's condition had worsened overnight. Her breathing was shallow, and her eyes remained closed even as the village began to stir. Hunter Ethan stood nearby, arms crossed, his expression hard as he watched the suffering animal. "We should put her out of her misery," he said to Connor Adams, the village blacksmith. "She won't survive much longer anyway." Connor shook his head, uncomfortable with the suggestion. The elder said to wait until the meeting tonight. Everyone deserves a voice in this. Savannah stepped out of her cabin, Lily balanced on her hip. The baby immediately turned toward the bear, her small arms reaching out. Savannah tried to distract her, but Lily's attention remained fixed on the suffering animal. "That thing is dangerous," Hunter Ethan called out, noticing Savannah and Lily. "Keep your baby away." Savannah nodded and turned to go back inside. But in that moment, Lily squirmed in her mother's arms with unexpected strength. Before Savannah could tighten her grip, Lily slipped down and, with surprising speed for a baby who had only recently learned to walk, toddled toward the chained bear. "Lily!" Savannah screamed, her heart stopping in her chest. Villagers froze, watching in horror as the small child moved directly toward the massive predator. The bear's eyes opened at the sound of Savannah's scream. She raised her head weakly, watching as the tiny human approached. Hunter Ethan lunged forward, but Connor grabbed his arm. "Wait," he whispered, though every instinct told him to rush forward and snatch the child away. Look at the bear. The mother bear made no move to attack. She watched Lily with tired eyes as the baby stopped just a foot away from her massive head. The village held its collective breath. Savannah stood paralyzed with fear, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter reach out a tiny hand toward the bear's nose. "No!" Hunter Ethan shouted, breaking free from Connor's grip and rushing forward. But before he could reach them, something extraordinary happened. Lily's small fingers gently touched the bear's snout, and instead of reacting with violence, the bear closed her eyes and released a deep sigh that seemed to carry all the pain and suffering of her captivity. Lily giggled, a sound of pure joy that echoed across the silent village square. She placed her other hand on the bear's head and leaned forward, pressing her forehead against the bear's fur in a gesture so tender that several villagers gasped. The bear remained perfectly still, allowing the touch of the innocent child. A single tear, yes, a tear, rolled from the corner of the bear's eye, leaving a wet trail in her dusty fur. It was a moment of connection so profound that even Hunter Ethan stopped in his tracks, his mouth open in disbelief. Jacob Bennett, the village elder, pushed through the growing crowd. He had been summoned by the commotion and arrived just in time to witness this impossible scene. The elder's weathered face softened as he watched Lily pat the bear's head with such gentle affection. "In all my years," he whispered, his voice carrying in the silence, "I have never seen such innocence break through such suffering." Savannah finally found the courage to move. She approached slowly, her heart pounding, but the bear made no threatening movements toward her or her child. When she reached Lily, she knelt beside her daughter, her fear giving way to wonder. "She's sad, Mama," Lily said in her limited vocabulary, her hand still resting on the bear's head. "She's sad." Those simple words, spoken with a child's clarity, cut through the tension and fear that had gripped the village. Savannah looked into the bear's eyes and saw not a dangerous beast, but a mother in pain, trapped and afraid, just trying to protect the new life growing inside her. "The chains," Savannah said, looking up at Elder Bennett with tears in her eyes. "We need to remove the chains." A murmur ran through the crowd. Hunter Ethan stepped forward, his face clouded with doubt. "It's too dangerous. Once free, she could—" "Look at her," Connor interrupted, gesturing toward the bear. "Really look at her. She's not going to hurt anyone." The bear's eyes moved from face to face, as if understanding their words. Her gaze finally settled on little Lily, who continued to stroke her fur with complete trust. Elder Bennett nodded slowly. "Bring the key," he commanded, his voice firm with decision. Hunter Ethan hesitated, then reached into his pocket and produced a large iron key. He handed it to Connor, who approached cautiously and knelt beside the chains. The bear watched him, her eyes following his movements, but she remained calm, even as the lock clicked open and the heavy chains fell away from her body. Freedom came with a soft clinking sound as the last chain slipped to the ground. The bear did not leap up or run away. She simply lay there, her body too weak from days of captivity. Lily placed both hands on the bear's face and leaned in close, whispering something that only the bear could hear. Then, to everyone's amazement, she planted a small kiss on the bear's nose. A collective gasp rose from the watching villagers. Some wiped tears from their eyes, while others looked away, ashamed of their fear and inaction. The bear slowly, painfully, rose to her feet. She stood unsteadily, her pregnant belly heavy and swollen. For a moment, she looked down at Lily, who showed no fear despite being completely dwarfed by the massive animal. The bear lowered her head one last time, gently nudging Lily with her nose in what could only be described as a gesture of gratitude. Then she turned and began to limp slowly toward the edge of the forest, stopping occasionally to look back at the small child who had set her free. As the bear disappeared into the trees, Savannah picked up Lily and held her close. "How did you know?" she whispered to her daughter. "How did you know she wouldn't hurt you?" Lily simply smiled and pointed to her own heart, then toward the forest where the bear had vanished. It was a gesture so simple yet so profound that it brought fresh tears to Savannah's eyes. That night, the village gathered around the central fire, but the conversation was subdued, reflective. Hunter Ethan sat apart from the others, his face troubled as he stared into the flames. "I was wrong," he finally said, breaking the silence. "I saw danger where there was only suffering. It took a child to show me the truth." Elder Bennett nodded, placing a hand on the hunter's shoulder. "We all have something to learn from what happened today. Fear can blind us to the truth that even the youngest among us can see clearly." From that day forward, Willow Creek Village changed. The villagers created a sanctuary at the forest edge where injured animals could find help. Savannah and Lily visited often, bringing food and comfort to the woodland creatures. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, a mother bear would appear at the forest edge with two small cubs playing at her feet. She never came close to the village again, but she would stand there watching, as if remembering the small hands that had shown her kindness when she needed it most. The story of Lily and the bear spread to neighboring villages and beyond, a testament to the power of innocence and compassion. It served as a reminder that sometimes the smallest hands can break the strongest chains, and the purest hearts can teach the most profound lessons. In Willow Creek Village, they still tell the tale of the chained mother bear and the baby who saved her, a story that continues to bring tears to the eyes of all who hear it, a story of fear overcome by innocence and suffering healed by simple, unconditional love. But the story didn't end there. 3 months after the bear's release, an unexpected visitor arrived in Willow Creek Village. Michael Hayes, a wildlife researcher from the city, heard rumors of the extraordinary event and traveled for days to meet the villagers who had witnessed it. "I've studied bears for 20 years, he explained to Elder Bennett as they sat in the village meeting hall. "What you're describing, a bear showing that level of restraint and emotional connection with a human child, it's unprecedented in scientific literature." The villagers gathered to hear Michael speak, curious about what he might reveal about their forest neighbor. Savannah sat with Lily on her lap, the child now a few months older, but still with the same bright, curious eyes. "Bears are intelligent creatures," Michael continued, spreading maps and photographs across the table. "But they're also instinctual, especially when pregnant or protecting cubs. A mother bear should have seen any human as a threat, particularly in her weakened, captive state." Hunter Ethan, who had been standing near the back of the room, stepped forward. In the months since the incident, he had changed profoundly. He no longer hunted predators, focusing instead on teaching the village children about respecting wildlife. "There was something different about that bear," he admitted, "something in her eyes, almost like she understood." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "That's what fascinates me. I've come with a proposal for your village." The proposal was bold: establish an official wildlife corridor through the forest surrounding Willow Creek Village. It would protect the bears and other animals while allowing researchers to study them from a respectful distance. The village would become known not as hunters but as stewards of the forest. We'd still be able to farm and live as we do now, Elder Bennett mused, considering the idea, but with boundaries that respect both our needs and theirs. The vote wasn't unanimous, but with Savannah and Hunter Ethan's passionate support, the majority agreed. Work began on marking the wildlife corridor, and Michael stayed to help establish observation posts that wouldn't disturb the animals. As winter approached, the first heavy snow blanketed the village. Savannah wrapped Lily in warm furs as they walked to the newly built observation post at the forest edge. Michael had invited them to see something special, something he'd discovered during his research. The small wooden structure was camouflaged among the trees, with narrow windows facing a clearing in the forest. Inside, the space was warm from a small stove, and Michael greeted them with excited whispers. "They're coming," he said, guiding them to the window. "Watch carefully." At first, Savannah saw nothing but swirling snow among the dark trees. Then movement caught her eye, a large shape emerging from the forest shadows. The mother bear appeared, healthier than when they'd last seen her, her coat thick and glossy against the winter cold. Behind her trailed two small cubs, tumbling and playing in the fresh snow. "Oh," Savannah breathed, her hand going to her mouth. "Her babies." The bear led her cubs to the center of the clearing, where Michael had established a feeding station as part of his research. But instead of immediately eating the berries and nuts left there, the mother bear paused. She raised her head, her nose working the air, and then turned directly toward the observation post. "She can't see us," Michael whispered. "The windows are designed to prevent that." But somehow the bear seemed to know they were there. She stood on her hind legs, towering in the clearing, her eyes fixed exactly where they stood watching. The cubs stopped playing, watching their mother curiously. "Mama!" Lily suddenly called out, pressing her small hands against the window. "Bear, Mama!" To their astonishment, the mother bear lowered herself to all fours and began walking directly toward them. Michael tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward the rifle he kept for emergencies. "No," Savannah said firmly, placing her hand on his arm. "She won't hurt us. I know it." The bear stopped just yards from the observation post, close enough that they could see the steam of her breath in the cold air. Slowly, deliberately, she nudged one of her cubs forward. The small bear cub took a few hesitant steps toward the structure, then sat back on its haunches and tilted its head, looking directly at the window. Lily giggled and waved. To everyone's shock, the cub raised a paw, almost as if returning the greeting. Michael gasped. "That's not possible," he whispered. "Bears don't." But the evidence was before their eyes. The mother bear watched as her cub made this connection, then huffed softly, calling the little one back to her side. Before leading her family back into the forest, she looked once more at the window, her gaze lingering for a moment that felt deeply meaningful. "She remembers," Savannah said softly. "She knows exactly who helped her." The encounter changed Michael's research fundamentally. He began documenting what he called advanced emotional intelligence in the bear population around Willow Creek Village. His initial papers were met with skepticism from the scientific community, but as more researchers visited and witnessed similar behaviors, attitudes slowly shifted. Spring brought unexpected news to the village. A letter arrived for Michael, delivered by a messenger from the city. As he read it, his expression transformed from surprise to elation. The university wants to establish a permanent research center here, he announced at the village gathering that evening. They're calling it the Lily Morgan Wildlife Observatory in honor of our youngest researcher. Savannah hugged Lily close, tears of pride shining in her eyes. Do you hear that, sweetheart? They're naming it after you. But the most extraordinary event occurred on Lily's second birthday. The village had prepared a celebration, with tables set up in the square and decorations hanging from every doorway. As the festivities began, Connor Adams, who had taken over the forest patrol, came running into the square. "You won't believe what's at the edge of the forest," he panted, pointing back the way he'd come. "Everyone needs to see this." The villagers followed him cautiously, with Savannah carrying Lily at the front of the group. What they saw at the forest boundary left them speechless. The mother bear stood at the tree line, her cubs now much larger at her side. But that wasn't what caused the villagers to stare in wonder. At the bear's feet lay a freshly caught salmon, placed precisely at the boundary marker of the village lands, a boundary the bears had never crossed since being given their protected corridor. "It's a gift," Hunter Ethan whispered, understanding dawning on his weathered face. She brought a gift for Lily's birthday. It seemed impossible, yet no other explanation made sense. The bear watched from a distance as Elder Bennett hesitantly approached and picked up the fish. He bowed deeply to the bear, acknowledging the offering with respect. The mother bear huffed softly, then turned and disappeared into the forest with her cubs. The salmon became the centerpiece of Lily's birthday feast, shared among all the villagers as a symbol of the extraordinary bond that had formed between their community and the forest creatures. As years passed, more remarkable events unfolded. The bears never threatened the village, and in turn, the villagers protected the wildlife corridor with fierce dedication. When poachers from distant towns attempted to hunt in their forest, the villagers drove them away, sometimes with unexplained help from the forest itself. Game trails that seemed to shift overnight, and large paw prints that appeared as warnings around the village perimeter. Lily grew into a curious, compassionate child, with an uncanny ability to sense animals in distress. By age 7, she could approach injured deer that would bolt from anyone else. By 10, she had helped Michael document communication patterns among bear families that challenged everything scientists thought they knew about Ursine intelligence. One autumn day, when Lily had reached her 12th birthday, a forest fire threatened to devastate the wildlife corridor. It began far from the village, caused by lightning striking a dead tree, but winds quickly pushed it toward both the animal habitats and Willow Creek itself. The villagers formed bucket lines, working desperately to create fire breaks, but the flames moved too quickly. Hunter Ethan, now the village leader after Elder Bennett's passing, made the difficult decision to evacuate. "We can't save the forest," he told the gathered villagers, his voice heavy with regret. "We need to save ourselves." As families gathered their most precious belongings, Lily slipped away. Savannah discovered her missing just as the evacuation began and frantically searched the village. "She went to the forest," Connor's son called out, pointing toward the observation post. "She said she had to warn them." Savannah's heart nearly stopped. The fire had already reached the outer edge of the wildlife corridor. Smoke billowed above the trees, and the roar of flames could be heard even from the village center. "I'm going after her," Savannah said, already running toward the forest edge. "It's too dangerous." Michael tried to stop her, but Savannah pulled away. "She's my daughter," she cried. "I won't leave her." Hunter Ethan and Connor quickly organized a search party, but as they reached the forest boundary, an astonishing sight stopped them in their tracks. From the smoke-filled trees emerged not just Lily, but a procession of wildlife, deer walking calmly alongside foxes, rabbits hopping next to badgers, and birds swooping low overhead. Leading this impossible parade were the bears, now 5 of them, including the original mother bear, gray-muzzled but still strong, and her fully grown cubs. Lily walked beside them, apparently unafraid as the animals moved in surprising order toward the river beyond the village. The villagers watched, transfixed, as the procession passed by them. Some of the children claimed later that they saw Lily speaking to the lead bear, though many adults dismissed this as imagination, heightened by the dramatic circumstances. The animals crossed the wide river, finding safety on the other shore, while the villagers fought through the night to save their homes. By morning, exhausted but successful, they watched as the rain finally came, helping to quench the last of the flames. When the danger had passed, Lily explained her actions to the worried adults. "I just knew they needed warning," she said simply. "The bear mother knew where to lead them. She always knows." The forest required years to recover, but recover it did, with the village helping to plant new trees and restore damaged habitats. The bond between the humans and animals of Willow Creek deepened further, becoming so remarkable that people from distant cities made pilgrimages to witness it for themselves. Scientists documented the phenomena in scholarly journals, philosophers debated its meaning, and spiritual leaders pointed to it as evidence of deeper connections in the natural world. But for the villagers of Willow Creek, it was simply life as they had come to know it. A life transformed by one moment of childlike compassion that broke through barriers of species and understanding. On the 10th anniversary of the bear's release, a statue was erected in the village square. Crafted by Connor Adams, who had discovered a talent for sculpture in his later years, it depicted a small child with her hand gently touching the nose of a sitting bear. The plaque beneath it read, "From the innocence of a child came wisdom for us all. May we always see with hearts unclouded by fear." Visitors often noticed something peculiar about the statue. Though made of solid bronze, the bear's eyes seemed to follow them, and many swore they could feel warmth emanating from the metal when they touched it, almost as if the story itself had imbued the monument with life. And on quiet nights, when the moon was full and the village slept peacefully, those who found themselves walking near the forest edge sometimes reported seeing a gray-muzzled mother bear standing at the tree line, watching over the village that had once been her prison and had become her ally, all because a baby saw with her heart what others could not see with their eyes. The legacy of Lily and the bear mother continued to inspire generations, a testament to the truth that compassion can bridge the widest divides and that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from those too young to know what is supposedly impossible. 20 years after the day the bear was freed, Willow Creek Village had transformed beyond recognition. What had once been a small, isolated settlement was now a thriving community known throughout the country as a center for wildlife research and conservation. The Lily Morgan Wildlife Observatory had expanded into a sprawling complex of sustainable buildings that blended harmoniously with the forest. Researchers and students from universities worldwide came to study the unique relationship between the villagers and the forest creatures. Lily herself, now a poised young woman of 21, had just completed her studies in wildlife biology at the country's most prestigious university. Though she had opportunities to work anywhere in the world, she returned to Willow Creek, drawn by bonds that science alone couldn't explain. "Welcome home," Savannah greeted her daughter at the village entrance. The years had been kind to Savannah. Though silver threaded through her hair, her eyes remained bright and her step light. She embraced Lily tightly. "Everyone's waiting to see you at the old meeting hall." As they walked through the village, Lily noticed how much had changed, yet how much remained the same. Solar panels now adorned the roofs of cabins, and a small wind farm operated at the village edge, but the sense of community, of belonging, remained unchanged. "There's someone else who's been waiting for you," Savannah said with a mysterious smile as they approached the hall. "Something tells me she knew you were coming home today." Lily raised an eyebrow questioningly, but her mother simply nodded toward the forest edge. There, standing in plain view during broad daylight, something the bears rarely did, was an elderly female bear. Her muzzle was completely gray now, her movements slow with age, but her eyes remained alert and intelligent. "The mother bear," Lily whispered, her heart filling with emotion. "After all these years." The bear watched them from a distance, making no move to approach the village, but clearly visible to anyone who looked. Several newer residents paused in their tasks, still unaccustomed to such bold appearances by the forest's largest predator. But the older villagers simply nodded respectfully in the bear's direction and continued with their work. "She's been coming to that same spot every day for the past week," Savannah explained. "Michael says it's unprecedented behavior even for her." At the mention of Michael's name, Lily smiled. The researcher had become like a second father to her, after her own father had passed away from illness 10 years earlier. Michael's meticulous documentation of the Willow Creek bears had revolutionized understanding of animal cognition and emotional intelligence. The welcoming celebration lasted well into the evening, with villagers both old and new gathering to welcome Lily home. Hunter Ethan, now in his 70s but still straight-backed and clear-eyed, presented her with a carved wooden medallion, a bear paw print surrounded by a child's handprint. "For the woman who taught us all how to see," he said, his voice cracking slightly with emotion as he placed it around her neck. As the celebration wound down, Michael pulled Lily aside, his expression serious. "There's something you need to know," he said, guiding her to a quiet corner. "The mother bear, your bear, she's dying." The words hit Lily like a physical blow. Though she had known, intellectually, that the bear must be nearing the end of her natural lifespan, the emotional reality struck deep. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Days, maybe a week," Michael replied gently. "She's stopped eating. The other bears bring her food, but she only takes water now." He paused, then added, "I've never seen anything like it, Lily." Her family, her cubs from multiple seasons, now adults with cubs of their own, they've been taking turns staying with her. It's almost like a hospice. Lily nodded, fighting back tears. "I need to see her." "I thought you might say that. I've prepared the observation post nearest to where she's resting." That night, after the village had quieted, Lily made her way to the forest observation post. The small structure had been upgraded over the years, but remained fundamentally the same. A quiet place to observe without disturbing. Michael had left a lantern and supplies, along with detailed notes on the bear's condition. Lily settled in, prepared for a long vigil. Through the specialized window, she could see the elderly bear resting in a natural depression beneath an ancient oak tree. Several younger bears kept a respectful distance, occasionally approaching to nuzzle the old matriarch before retreating again. As the hours passed, Lily found herself speaking softly, reminiscing about their shared history. "Do you remember when you brought the salmon for my birthday? Or when you led the animals away from the fire? Everyone said it was impossible, but I always knew you understood." Around midnight, something extraordinary happened. The mother bear, who had been lying still for hours, suddenly raised her head. She looked directly toward the observation post, her gaze unerring despite the camouflage and special glass. Then, with obvious effort, She rose to her feet. The younger bears stirred, moving as if to support her, but she huffed softly and they backed away. Slowly, painfully, the elderly bear began walking directly toward the observation post. Lily's heart raced. In all the years of study, the bears had respected the boundaries established between their world and the human village. They approached the observation posts but never directly interacted with them. This deliberate approach was unprecedented. The bear stopped just feet from the structure. Up close, Lily could see how time had worn down the once mighty creature. Her fur patchy in places, her frame thinner, her eyes clouded with cataracts. Yet there remained a dignity, a presence that commanded respect. Acting on instinct, Lily opened the observation post door and stepped outside. "Lily, no!" Michael's voice came from behind her. He had arrived silently while she was focused on the bear. "It's all right," Lily said without turning around. "She won't hurt me." The elderly bear watched as Lily approached, stopping just an arm's length away. For a long moment, they regarded each other. The woman who had once been a baby, with a heart pure enough to see past fear, and the bear who had shown mercy when she had every reason for vengeance. Slowly, carefully, Lily extended her hand, palm up, reminiscent of the gesture she had made as a child. The bear leaned forward and, with the gentlest of movements, pressed her nose against Lily's palm. Michael, watching from the doorway of the observation post, fumbled for his camera. "This is impossible," he whispered, documenting what no researcher had ever recorded: direct, peaceful contact between a wild bear and human, initiated by the bear. What happened next would become the subject of scientific papers, philosophical debates, and spiritual discussions for decades to come. The elderly bear made a soft huffing sound, then slowly lowered herself to the ground. She lay her massive head near Lily's feet, closed her eyes, and released a long, deep breath. Lily knelt beside her, tears flowing freely now, and placed a hand on the bear's shoulder. She could feel the slow, steady heartbeat beneath her palm gradually becoming fainter. "Thank you," Lily whispered, "for everything you taught us." The bear's breathing slowed, then stopped altogether. The great matriarch of the Willow Creek Forest had chosen to end her journey in the presence of the human who had once saved her. The younger bears, watching from the forest edge, made no sound, no movement. They simply observed as Lily sat with their matriarch, honoring her passing with quiet dignity. By morning, the news had spread throughout the village and the forest alike. Something remarkable occurred as the sun rose. Bears from throughout the territory began to gather at the forest edge. Deer stepped cautiously from between the trees, followed by foxes, wolves, and countless smaller creatures. They formed a silent semicircle, watching as the villagers gathered on their side of the boundary. "What's happening?" Connor's grandson, now a young man, asked in hushed tones. Hunter Ethan shook his head in wonder. "I believe they're waiting for us to help them honor her." What followed was unprecedented. A joint funeral ceremony, with humans and animals alike participating in their own ways. The villagers, led by Lily, carefully prepared a burial site at the precise boundary between village and forest, belonging fully to neither world, but connecting both. As they lowered the bear's body into the earth, the animals began to make sounds, not of distress, but rhythmic calls that created an eerie, beautiful harmony. The bears rocked back and forth. The wolves raised their muzzles in mournful howls, and even the birds contributed with synchronized calls. The humans, moved beyond words, joined with their own songs, ancient melodies that spoke of respect for the natural world and the circle of life and death. As the ceremony concluded, each animal approached the grave, leaving something behind. a pine cone, a special stone, a freshly caught fish, before retreating back into the forest. In the days that followed, scientists from around the world converged on Willow Creek, desperate to understand the unprecedented collective behavior they had witnessed. Michael's videos and documentation became the most studied wildlife footage in history. But for Lily, the most significant moment came 3 days after the funeral, when she visited the gravesite alone. A fresh sprout had already emerged from the soil, a tiny oak sapling, growing with impossible speed. As she knelt to examine it, she noticed something half buried beside it, a bear claw, shed naturally from the matriarch before her death. Something compelled Lily to take the claw and press it against the medallion Hunter Ethan had given her. They fit together perfectly, like pieces of a puzzle designed to connect. As they touched, a warm sensation spread through Lily's hand and up her arm. Suddenly, with crystal clarity, she understood her purpose. The connection between Willow Creek Village and the forest creatures hadn't been a random occurrence or even just the result of one act of kindness. It was the beginning of something far more profound, a healing of the ancient divide between humans and the natural world. That night, Lily dreamed of the mother bear, not elderly and frail, but in her prime, running through sunlit forests. In the dream, the bear spoke to her not in words but in feelings and images, showing Lily a vision of the future. Humans and animals living in conscious harmony, each respecting the other's nature and needs. When she awoke, Lily knew what she had to do. She gathered the village elders and shared her vision for expanding their conservation model worldwide. It wouldn't be easy. Most human communities lacked Willow Creek's unique history and connection, but it was necessary. The mother bear chose to trust us with her legacy, Lily told them. We need to be worthy of that trust. Over the next decade, the Willow Creek conservation model spread to communities around the world. Lily traveled extensively, sharing the scientifically documented story of her village and helping others establish their own harmonious relationships with local wildlife. The oak tree at the gravesite grew with extraordinary speed, reaching in 10 years a size that should have taken 50. Its branches spread wide, creating a natural canopy exactly half over village land and half over the forest. Animals and humans alike gathered in its shade, the boundary between their worlds increasingly meaningless. On the 10th anniversary of the mother bear's passing, Lily, now an internationally respected conservation leader, returned to Willow Creek for a special ceremony. The village had prepared a time capsule to be buried beneath the great oak, containing records of their unique history and messages for future generations. As Lily placed her contribution into the capsule, the medallion with the bear claw attached, something caught her eye at the forest edge. A young female bear, remarkably similar in markings to the original mother bear, stood watching. Around her neck was a distinctive white patch of fur in the perfect shape of a handprint. Her great-granddaughter, Michael whispered, now elderly himself but still sharp-eyed when it came to identifying individual bears. The genetic probability of that marking occurring naturally is essentially 0. The young bear maintained eye contact with Lily for a long moment, then deliberately raised her paw in a gesture that could not be misinterpreted as anything but a greeting. The assembled crowd gasped. Even after years of unusual animal behavior in Willow Creek, such a human-like gesture was extraordinary. Lily raised her hand in return, tears streaming down her face. As she did, the sunlight filtering through the oak leaves created a pattern on the ground between them. A perfect circle, half in shadow, half in light, with a wavy line down the middle that resembled neither a boundary nor a barrier, but a connection. "It's not ending," Savannah said softly, taking her daughter's hand. "It's just beginning." That night, as stars filled the sky above Willow Creek Village, many reported seeing shapes moving among the trees. Not just bears, but many forest creatures, gathering in what appeared to be a celebration of their own. The sounds that drifted from the forest were not threatening, but melodic, almost like music. Some of the village children, less inhibited than their parents, slipped from their beds and made their way to the edge of the village. There, in the moonlight beneath the great oak, they found young bears, wolf pups, fox kits, and other animal youngsters engaged in what could only be described as play. After a moment of hesitation, the human children joined them. By morning, when worried parents found their children sleeping peacefully under the oak tree, curled up alongside their animal counterparts, the final barrier between the two worlds had dissolved. What had begun with a baby's touch on a suffering bear's nose had culminated in a new kind of community, one that recognized no meaningful distinction between human and animal intelligence, emotion, or worth. As decades passed, Willow Creek Village became known as the birthplace of the Great Reconnection, the global movement that ultimately reversed centuries of environmental destruction and species extinction. Anthropologists and historians would later identify the story of Lily and the mother bear as the catalyst that changed humanity's relationship with the natural world. And at the center of it all stood the great oak tree, growing from the resting place of a bear who had suffered at human hands but chosen forgiveness over vengeance, and whose legacy lived on in every wild creature that learned to see humans not as enemies but as partners in the complex dance of life on Earth. Visitors to Willow Creek today, over 100 years since a small child touched a chained bear, often report feeling something special as they pass beneath the massive oak. Some claim to hear whispers in the rustling leaves, while others describe a sensation of profound connection to every living thing around them. Whether these experiences are the lingering energy of an extraordinary bond, or simply the power of a story well remembered matters little. What matters is the lesson learned and continuously taught by each new generation of Willow Creek's children, both human and animal. That true strength lies not in dominance but in compassion, not in chains, but in the courage to break them, and that sometimes the purest wisdom comes from those who have not yet learned what the world insists is impossible. But the story of Willow Creek continued to evolve in ways no one could have predicted. 200 years after Lily first touched the chained bear, the village had grown into a thriving city, though one unlike any other on Earth. The buildings rose organically among the trees, designed in harmony with the natural landscape rather than imposing upon it. Solar glass and living walls allowed humans to dwell within nature without destroying it. At the center of everything stood the great oak, now a colossal giant whose massive trunk would take 20 people holding hands to encircle. Its roots spread beneath the entire city, connecting to every home and structure through an intricate network that scientists had discovered contained neural-like properties. The tree was not merely alive. It had developed a form of consciousness that defied conventional understanding. On the bicentennial anniversary of what historians now called the First Connection, people and animals gathered beneath the great oak for a ceremony of remembrance. Descendants of the original villagers mingled with descendants of the original forest creatures. Among them was Dr. Avery Reed Morgan, Lily's great-great-great-granddaughter and the current director of the Global Reconnection Institute. 2 centuries ago, Avery addressed the assembled crowd. A baby reached out to touch a suffering bear, not knowing that such an act was supposed to be impossible. That single moment of connection changed not just this community, but eventually the entire world. As she spoke, a massive bear, larger than any naturally occurring species in historical records, emerged from the forest edge. Unlike the bears of old who walked on 4 legs, this creature stood upright, its bearing dignified and deliberate. Around its neck hung a medallion of carved wood, passed down through generations of the bear lineage. The crowd parted respectfully as the bear approached the podium. No one showed fear. Such interactions had long since become normal in Willow Creek, though they remained extraordinary anywhere else in the world. Today, Avery continued, we welcome Guardian Ursus, descendant of the mother bear and representative of the Forest Council, to share in our remembrance. The bear inclined its head in acknowledgement, then did something that would have been unthinkable in earlier times. It spoke. Not in human language, but through a translation device developed specifically to bridge the communication gap between species. The technology had been pioneered in Willow Creek 50 years earlier, after researchers finally proved that animals had always possessed language. Humans had simply been incapable of understanding it. The story of my ancestor and the human child is taught to every cub. Guardian Ursus's words flowed through the translator. It reminds us that suffering can lead to understanding, and that compassion can unlock doors long thought sealed by nature itself. The ceremony proceeded with shared stories from both human and animal perspectives. Children performed a dance that reenacted the original connection, while young bears demonstrated their traditional remembrance movements. But as the sun reached its zenith, something unexpected occurred. The great oak began to tremble, its leaves rustling despite the absence of wind. The ground beneath the gathered crowd vibrated gently, and a low humming filled the air. The vibrations increased until everyone could feel them resonating within their bodies. "What's happening?" Voices murmured nervously. In 200 years, the great oak had never exhibited such behavior. Guardian Ursus raised a massive paw for silence. "The tree speaks," the bear intoned, dropping to all fours and pressing an ear against the enormous trunk. Avery approached cautiously, placing her hand against the bark. Immediately her eyes widened. "I can feel something," she whispered. "It's like images forming in my mind." Scientists rushed forward with equipment to measure the unprecedented phenomenon. Sensors detected electrical activity within the tree, more complex than anything previously recorded. Patterns that resembled brainwaves, but on a vastly different scale. "It's showing me something," Avery continued, her voice growing stronger. "The past, but also the future?" Guardian Ursus nodded slowly. "The tree exists partially outside of time as we understand it. Its roots reach deep into the past, while its highest branches touch moments not yet come to pass." As more people and animals pressed against the trunk, they began to share in the vision. Children were the most receptive, describing with perfect clarity scenes from Lily's original encounter with the mother bear. Details never recorded in any history book, but matching exactly across hundreds of individual accounts. But the vision didn't stop with the past. It extended forward, showing glimpses of challenges yet to come. A great environmental crisis that would test the hard-won harmony between humans and nature. In the vision, the world beyond Willow Creek remained resistant to the lessons of coexistence, continuing patterns of exploitation and destruction that threatened all life. When the connection finally faded, the assembled crowd stood in stunned silence. The revelation was both a gift and a burden, knowledge of a coming crisis that might undo centuries of progress. "The tree has never communicated like this before," Guardian Ursus stated, concern evident even through the translator. "Something must be changing." That night, an emergency meeting convened in the communal hall, a circular structure built around one of the great oak's largest roots. Human leaders sat alongside animal representatives from every species in the region. The oldest among them was Jacob Bennett IV, a direct descendant of the original village elder who had permitted the bear's release centuries earlier. The vision was clear, Jacob began, his wrinkled hand steady as he activated a holographic display showing compiled accounts from hundreds of witnesses. A threat is coming, not just to Willow Creek, but to the entire global ecosystem. The harmony we've established here remains fragile in the wider world. Guardian Ursus nodded agreement. My kin in distant forests report increasing encroachment and destruction. The reconnection movement has stalled in many regions, facing resistance from those who still see dominance over nature as their right. Avery studied the data with a scientist's precision. The tree showed us something specific, a tipping point. Current environmental models suggest we have perhaps 20 years before irreversible damage occurs in critical ecosystems. But why now? Asked Connor Adams, 7th, head of the city's engineering guild. Why would the tree choose this moment to communicate after centuries of silence? The answer came from an unexpected source. A small girl, no more than 5 years old, had slipped into the meeting unnoticed. Emma Hayes, daughter of one of the junior researchers, stood up from where she had been sitting quietly in the corner. "The tree is sad," she said simply, with the directness only a child could manage. "It feels the pain of all the other trees in the world. They're crying, but nobody hears them except our tree." The assembled leaders fell silent, struck by the parallels to their own history. Once again, a child perceived what adults could not. "The girl speaks truth," Guardian Ursus rumbled. "My distant cousins report the same, a great suffering in the global forest consciousness." Avery knelt beside Emma. "How do you know the tree is sad, sweetheart?" "It told me," Emma replied, as if stating the obvious. "When I play by its roots, it tells me stories. It showed me all the other places where trees are dying and animals have nowhere to go." The revelation that a child had been communicating with the great oak all along stunned the gathering. Tests quickly confirmed that Emma possessed an unprecedented neural compatibility with the tree's electromagnetic patterns. She was, in essence, a natural interpreter for a consciousness that had been trying to communicate for generations. This discovery catalyzed a new phase in the Willow Creek story. With Emma's help, researchers developed a more sophisticated translation system that allowed broader communication with the great oak. The tree, they learned, was not a single entity but a nexus point for a vast network of plant consciousness that spanned the globe, a network increasingly fragmented by deforestation and development. Through this connection, Willow Creek received detailed knowledge of environmental conditions worldwide, far more comprehensive than satellite monitoring or ground sensors could provide. The tree could sense the health of distant forests, the migration patterns of animals thousands of miles away, and the spreading impact of pollution and climate change. But most importantly, it offered solutions. Ancient knowledge preserved in vegetative memory about how ecosystems had previously adapted to dramatic environmental shifts. This wisdom, combined with human technology and animal instinct, formed the foundation for the most ambitious conservation effort in history, the Global Reconnection Project. Emma, as she grew older, became the project's heart. By age 12, she could communicate with plant life far beyond the great oak, establishing connections with nascent consciousness in forests around the world. By 16, she had developed the ability to sense the emotional states of animals without technological assistance, a talent that even the most integrated Willow Creek residents found remarkable. The Global Reconnection Project faced fierce resistance. Powerful interests dependent on environmental exploitation fought against its implementation. Religious fundamentalists denounced the communication with plants and animals as unnatural or heretical. Political leaders feared the economic disruption that true sustainability would require. The conflict came to a head 20 years after the tree's first communication. exactly as it had predicted. A prolonged drought had weakened ecosystems worldwide, leading to cascading failures in vital regions. Wildlife populations outside protected areas plummeted. Climate refugees numbering in the millions strained social systems beyond breaking points. In this moment of crisis, Willow Creek revealed its final secret. The Great Oak was not merely a connection point for existing networks, but had been actively extending its root system far beyond the city boundaries. Microscopic tendrils had followed waterways, tunneled beneath mountains and crossed oceans, creating a living neural network that could potentially unite disconnected ecosystems. The plan that emerged was audacious. A synchronized global planting of specially cultivated great oak saplings, descendants of the original tree nurtured from its acorns, at strategic points worldwide. Each sapling carried the genetic memory of the great oak and its capacity for heightened consciousness. If successful, they would gradually establish connections with local plant networks, creating islands of reconnection that would eventually merge into a unified system. Emma, now 30 years old, and recognized as the foremost botanical communicator in the world, personally carried these saplings to the most damaged ecosystems. At each location, she performed a ceremony reminiscent of the original connection between Lily and the mother bear, a reminder that healing begins with a single, compassionate touch. The decade that followed tested humanity as never before. Weather patterns grew increasingly erratic as planetary systems sought a new equilibrium. Food production faltered in traditional agricultural regions. The old economic order collapsed under the weight of environmental reality. Yet in this darkest hour, the seeds of reconnection took root, both literally and figuratively. The great oak saplings grew with supernatural speed, accelerated by their connection to the mother tree in Willow Creek. Around each sapling, damaged ecosystems began to regenerate at rates that defied scientific explanation. More remarkably, the presence of the saplings seemed to affect nearby human communities. People reported experiences similar to those in Willow Creek: increased empathy, clearer communication, and a renewed sense of connection to the natural world. Children especially showed heightened sensitivity, often becoming interpreters between humans and local wildlife, just as Emma had done. On the 25th anniversary of the Great Oak's first communication, Emma returned to Willow Creek after years of global travel. Now, middle-aged, her hair streaked with premature gray, she carried the weight of her work in the lines on her face. But her eyes remained bright with purpose as she approached the massive trunk of the original tree. The gathered crowd watched in reverent silence as she placed both hands against the bark, closing her eyes in deep concentration. For several minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. "It's working," she announced, her voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "The saplings have established connections on every continent. The network is healing." Guardian Ursus, now elderly but still powerful, approached to stand beside her. The massive bear had been Emma's constant companion throughout her global mission, providing protection and wisdom in equal measure. "What does the Great One show you?" the bear asked, its translator rendering the deep growls into melodic speech. "The future," Emma replied simply. "Not just possibilities now, but certainties. The path forward is clear." That evening, beneath a sky filled with stars, Emma shared the tree's vision with the citizens of Willow Creek and representatives from communities worldwide. Through holographic displays, she showed them images of forests regenerated, oceans cleansed, and animals returning to lands long abandoned. More significantly, she revealed glimpses of a new kind of human society, one built on principles of interdependence rather than exploitation. "The Great Reconnection isn't just about saving nature from humans," Emma explained. It's about saving humans through reconnection with nature and with each other. The isolation we've felt from the natural world mirrors the isolation we've created between ourselves. The most remarkable revelation came last. The Great Oak Network had developed the ability to moderate extreme weather patterns by synchronizing the release of specific compounds from billions of trees simultaneously. These natural aerosols could seed clouds, reduce temperatures in critical areas, and gradually stabilize the climate system that human activity had destabilized. Nature has always had mechanisms for self-regulation, Emma concluded. We just interfered with them too much and too quickly. Now, with the network's guidance, we can help restore those systems, not by imposing our will, but by listening and cooperating. In the decades that followed, the Great Reconnection transformed human civilization more profoundly than any technological revolution. The consciousness that began with a single oak tree growing from a bear's gravesite eventually encompassed a planetary network of interconnected life. Humans didn't lose their identity within this network but found it enhanced and contextualized by their place in the greater whole. Museums around the world displayed images of the chained mother bear and tiny lily, reminding humanity how close it had come to losing its essential connection to the natural world, and how a single act of childlike compassion had set them on a different path. On the 300th anniversary of that first touch, Willow Creek hosted a global celebration unlike any before. The city had evolved further, with boundaries between human habitation and forest having dissolved almost entirely. Buildings constructed from living materials integrated seamlessly with the landscape, drawing energy from the sun and nourishment from the soil without disrupting natural cycles. At the celebration center stood the great oak, now so enormous that its upper branches disappeared into the clouds. Its consciousness had evolved as well, developing faculties that even the most advanced human minds struggled to comprehend. Yet it remained deeply connected to its origins, the simple act of mercy that had allowed a pregnant bear to return to the forest and give birth in freedom. A young girl, the newest in a long line of natural communicators, stepped forward to place her hand against the great oak's trunk. The assembled crowd fell silent, waiting for the tree's anniversary message. The girl smiled as the connection formed, then spoke with a clarity that belied her years. The tree shows me the beginning and the end, the smallest root and the tallest branch. It says that in 300 years we have learned what truly matters, that a chain broken becomes a bridge built, that a hand offered in kindness can transform fear into friendship, and that the greatest strength lies not in domination, but in connection. As if in response to her words, a bear cub emerged from the forest edge, followed by its mother. The cub approached the gathered humans without fear, moving with the confidence of one returning home. Around its neck hung a tiny medallion, a perfect replica of the one hunter Ethan had given to Lily centuries before. The cub stopped before the young communicator and rose on its hind legs. For a moment, they regarded each other with mutual curiosity and respect. Then, in a gesture that echoed across 300 years of shared history, the child extended her hand, and the cub gently pressed its nose against her palm. In that timeless moment of connection, the story of Willow Creek came full circle, not ending, but renewing itself in each generation that remembered the profound truth first discovered by a chained bear and a baby with an open heart. That the barriers we believe separate us from each other and from the natural world exist primarily in our minds, and that compassion has the power to dissolve them all. And high above, the great oak's leaves rustled with a sound remarkably like laughter, the joyful recognition that the simplest lessons are often the most difficult to learn, but once learned, become the foundation upon which all other wisdom is built. For in the end, what began as a story about a pregnant mother bear and a human baby transcended its origins to become something far greater, a testament to the transformative power of seeing with the heart, of choosing connection over division, and of recognizing that in the web of life, every strand touches every other, creating a tapestry of relationships that extends beyond the limits of our understanding, but remains forever within the reach of our compassion. As twilight descended on the 300th anniversary celebration, an elderly woman made her way slowly through the crowd. Her face bore the gentle lines of a life fully lived, her silver hair cascading down her shoulders like a waterfall of moonlight. This was Emma Hayes in the winter of her life, now 105 years old, but still radiating the quiet strength that had guided the world through its darkest environmental crisis. She approached the great oak, leaning slightly on a walking stick carved from one of the tree's fallen branches. The young communicator, a girl named Lily after the original child who had started everything, stepped aside respectfully. The bear cub watched with bright, curious eyes as Emma placed her weathered hand against the massive trunk one final time. "Old friend," she whispered, her voice barely audible to those nearby. "We've come so far together." The gathering fell silent as they witnessed this moment between the woman who had spent her life spreading the great oak's wisdom and the ancient consciousness that had guided humanity back from the brink. Even the animals, bears, wolves, deer, and countless others that had joined the celebration, grew still, sensing the significance of this communion. As Emma closed her eyes, tears began to stream down her lined cheeks. Those closest to her could see her lips moving silently, engaged in a private conversation with the entity that had been her constant companion since childhood. After several minutes, she opened her eyes and turned to face the assembled crowd, her expression a complex mixture of profound joy and gentle sorrow. "The great oak has shared its final vision with me," she announced, her voice surprisingly strong and clear. "And now I must share it with you." Using the communication technology that had evolved from her early work with the tree, Emma projected images directly from her mind to the gathered crowd. But unlike previous visions that showed specific events or possibilities, this one conveyed pure emotion, a symphonic blend of feelings so complex and beautiful that many fell to their knees, overwhelmed by its intensity. There was the aching sorrow of the chained mother bear, the innocent compassion of baby Lily, the wonder of first connection, the grief of necessary partings, the joy of unexpected reunions, the patient wisdom of centuries, and the bright hope of countless new beginnings. All these emotions and thousands more, woven together into a tapestry of lived experience that transcended species and time. When the vision faded, not a single eye remained dry. Humans embraced each other and their animal counterparts, overcome by the shared experience of 3 centuries of healing not just of the planet, but of the ancient wound that had separated humanity from its place in the natural world. "The great oak has shown us that our story never truly ends," Emma said softly, her voice carrying in the perfect stillness. "Each act of compassion ripples through time, touching lives we will never know and creating possibilities we cannot imagine." As if responding to her words, the massive tree began to glow softly from within, a gentle blue-green luminescence that spread from its core through every branch and leaf. Scientists would later determine that the phenomenon resulted from a synchronized bioluminescence involving billions of microscopic organisms living in harmony with the tree, but in that moment it appeared nothing short of miraculous. The bear cub approached Emma and gently tugged at her clothing. Understanding immediately, she knelt beside the young animal, coming face to face with living proof of the legacy that would continue long after she was gone. "You know what to do," she whispered to the cub, gently touching the medallion around its neck. "You've always known." The cub's mother approached, her movements dignified and deliberate. Unlike her ancestors of centuries past, she walked partially upright, evolution accelerated by generations of closer human interaction. She stopped before Emma and, with extraordinary gentleness, placed a paw against the elderly woman's cheek in a gesture of profound respect and connection. Emma leaned into the touch, closing her eyes one final time. "Thank you," she whispered, though whether to the bear, the tree, or to life itself, no one could say. As the last light of day faded from the sky, Emma Hayes, the last living link to the original crisis and rebirth, passed peacefully from this world to whatever lay beyond, cradled between the roots of the great oak and surrounded by the community of all living beings that she had helped to forge. The young communicator, Lily, was the first to notice the small green shoot that emerged from the ground where Emma's hand had fallen. By morning, it had grown into a sapling unlike any seen before. Not quite oak, not quite human, but something new that contained elements of both. Guardian Ursus VII, descendant of the bear family that had protected the Hayes lineage for generations, approached the sapling and sniffed it carefully. "She has become part of the network," the bear announced, voice heavy with emotion. "Her wisdom is preserved." In the years that followed, the sapling grew into a tree with remarkable properties. Its leaves contained unique compounds that could heal ailments previously considered incurable. Its fruit provided nourishment that enhanced cognitive abilities and emotional intelligence. But most remarkably, those who rested in its shade often reported dreams in which Emma appeared to them, offering guidance specific to their life circumstances. On the first anniversary of Emma's passing, something extraordinary happened that convinced even the most skeptical that something of her consciousness lived on within the tree network. Throughout the world, at precisely the same moment, every sapling descended from the great oak produced a single, perfect bloom, regardless of season or hemisphere, that emanated a subtle fragrance reminiscent of the wildflowers Emma had loved to gather as a child. The young Lily, now the primary communicator with the great oak, explained what the trees were telling her. They say that nothing truly dies that lives in connection. Emma's body has returned to the earth, but her essence flows through the roots of every tree, mingles with the water of every stream, dances in the movement of every animal, and whispers in the laughter of every child. She is everywhere now, just as the connection she helped restore is everywhere. This understanding, that death was not an ending but a transformation, not a severing of bonds but an expansion of them, spread through human communities worldwide, easing ancient fears and bringing comfort to countless hearts. People began to see their own mortality not as a tragedy to be feared, but as a contribution to be offered. A final giving back to the network of life that had sustained them. On quiet nights, visitors to the great oak sometimes reported hearing a sound like distant laughter carried on the wind, reminiscent of both a child's innocent giggle and a bear's contented huff, as if the original participants in this centuries-long story were still present, still witnessing the ongoing miracle of connection they had set in motion with the simplest of gestures. A tiny hand reaching out to touch a suffering creature. And in this way, the story that began with a pregnant mother bear chained in a village square continued to unfold through countless new beginnings, a living testament to the truth that compassion, once awakened, never truly dies but remains alive in every heart, willing to see beyond fear, every hand willing to break chains rather than forge them, and every soul wise enough to recognize that in the greatest story ever told, the story of life itself, we are all always connected.